Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Ayin Hey and Avodah Zarah. We learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael how to assume about Sarah V'Shivya. Says the Gemara about 10 lines down on the page. One minute, Rav Avu. They asked the following question, Rav Avu. Hani Gorni Darmoy. These wicker nets. Wicker nets is what they put on top of the wine press, to hold the grapes down. So they had these nets that kept them in place, and you bought them from a goy. What's the halacha? How do you purify them? How do you kasher them? Only Rabavu. So Rabavu answered. Now listen carefully. Remember in the Mishnah we said yesterday that if you buy a wine press from a goy, or a wine press that was lined with pitch from a goy, what do? You have to scour it. And we explained that scouring involves water and ashes, rubbing it with ashes and rinsing it with water. Several ways to do it. Do you do it 2, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, depending how you look at it? Because that's scouring. So here we're going to see that scouring is not necessary according to Bavu. So Bavu said that, what do you do? Amalei or Bavu says, Tanaisur, we learned it from a similar case. You're asking about a case of if you bought them from a goy and there's a question of yayin nesech. I'll show you what we said in a brisa regarding something, a wine press that became tamei, that you're trying to purify from defilement. Haresha you got gitavu base bad of tamei. And let's say your wine press or your oil press were tamei, because and you want it to be matar them. In other words, so that let's say a kohen could eat them with truma, etc. Hadapin v'adoshin v'alulavim. The boards, they would put the boards on the grapes. V'adoshin, those are the troughs themselves, like the vat in the wine press. The love and the supporting beams. Madichan, it's enough just to rinse them. All you have to do is rinse them. And Rashi says this is really the psak that Rabavu is giving counter to the Mishnah, because Mishnah says they have to be scoured. Here he says that the basic vat itself, the base habat itself, the wine press, has to be rinsed. The hakolin and the wicker work that we're asking about, the wicker work, if it's made out of willows and hemp, then they have to be scoured. Shel shifa v'shel gami, if it's made out of bast and reeds, which are more absorbent, you have to be aged for 12 months. In other words, you have to let them lay fallow with no work on them, let them sit for 12 months. Not 12 months, but rather from wine press to wine press. In other words, from season to season and from oil press to oil press season. Says the Gemara, that's also 12 months because they used to do this once a year. Nafkamina is if there was an early or a late ripening. In other words, that if you say it's 12 months, that's 12 months fixed. If you say it's from season to season, well, sometimes the season could be earlier or later depending on how they ripen, and that's good enough. So Rav Shimon says it's enough, doesn't have to be full 12 months, just depends on on the season. Rabbi Yossi Amar wrote if you want to be matar them, miyad, let's say you don't want to wait 12 months, or you want to wait a season. We're talking about the bast and the reeds, which are very absorbent. What do? Magil and baroschen, you can scald them, purge them with hot water, or scald them with olive water. Those are both basically you're scalding them, and that gets rid of any remnant of yayin nesach that was in them. It's enough to leave them under a pipe that has a running stream of water, or under a spring that has rapid water running out of it, and leave it for that, and that's good enough. In other words, we have several processes for getting rid of the yayin nesach in the bast or the reeds. Either wait 12 months, or wait a full season, or scald them with water. Shmuel says you can also leave them under a running flow of water, a spring or a pipe. How long? How long? Ona, just for one period. Ona is a period. Really, we'll see it's like 12 hours. Then he says, so Rabbi Vu is giving an answer. The question was raised to him, what do you do if you buy these wicker nets from goyim? So he says, well, just like when it comes to be matar them from tumah, the same thing applies to yayin nesach. And then he says, keder shomer b'yayin nesach, like we say b'yayin nesach, the same thing we say when it comes to purify it. This is more a kloppy lie. Where are you going with this? We're bringing a proof from Taros. That's what we're discussing over. That's the discussion over here. This brisa, it's like Taros. We're bringing a proof from that to yayin nesach, not the other way around. But Taras Kamina, we're talking about Taras. We're talking about taras. So you're saying the way to properly read it is Ella Kader Shamar Taras, the same way we said by taras, that's how you purify them by these various methods. The same thing is by yayin nesach. So it's not, you're not learning out taros from yayin nesach, but the other way around. Rabbi Vu is saying the same rules that apply to taros that we saw in that brisa apply to yayin nesach as well. Kama ona, how long is a period? Amar Rav Chia Barabba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, o yom o laili, either a day or a night. It's like a 12-hour period. Rav Chana She'ina, that was his name. Rav Chana Bar She'ina, Amar Rav Chana, it says in Rabbi Yochanan, Chatziyam Chatzala, a half a day and a half a night. A half a day and a half a night. If we're talking about at the beginning of the spring or the beginning of the fall, at the equinox, when the number of hours in the day and the number of hours are equal, which would be how much? 12 hours each. All right, then you could say either a day or a night. But if you're talking about the beginning of the summer or the beginning of the winter, the longest day of the year and the shortest day of the year, then the right way to do it is if you want 12 hours, you take a half a day and a half a night. That gives you the same 12 hours. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. Hani Ravki, the filter bags, darmoy, filter bags that we used with wine by the goyim. So there's a concern of yain nesach. The mazi, if they're made out of hair, madichem, all you have to do is rinse them. The amr, if they're made out of wool, menakban, you have to scour them. The kiss, if they're made out of flax, miyashin, you have to be aged. These are the different methods we saw before also. The easiest thing is rinsing. So we said rinsing for a vat, Rav Vu Paskin, not like the Mishnah, that rinsing is enough. If it's made out of these filter bags are made out of wool, they're more absorbent. You have to scour them. If they're made out of flax, which are very absorbent, then you have to age them. In other words, leave them for a year. The kakatra, if there's any knots among them, right? Among these bags and ropes, there are knots. Surely you have to open them because the wine could get stuck in the knots. The knots keep the wine in. So make sure that you untie them first. Hani dekuli v'chalasa. If you have wicker baskets and strainers, darmoy of the goyim, how do you purify them? Dechiti, if they're plated, b'chavle ditsuri, if they're plated with strips of palm fiber, again, these are less absorbent. Madich, all you have to do is rinse them. The tzifsa, and I'm at base now, if they have made out of twigs, Rashi says that's a kind of reed. I mean, it's like reeds. Tzifsa, the nakban, then you have to scour them. The kisn, again, if it's made out of flax, miyashin, you have to age them. The isbu, kitri, again, if they have knots in them, sharily, you have to untie them first. Itmar. Let's say you have a wine press, and you had an amoritz there who presumably was not tahor, and he stuck his hand in there, vinaga, bashkos, and he touched one of the clusters of grapes in the wine vat, in the wine press. What do you do? Rabbi Rav Chia, there's machlokas. Chad Omar, eshkol v'kos v'zetmein. That particular cluster and everything around it is tamei v'cholagat kula tar, but the rest of the wine press is tar. The Chad Omar, kolagat kula nami tamei. The whole thing is tamei. So it's more Almando Meshkov because we have B'chol Kula Torah. The one who says that only the part that he touched is Tameh and the area surrounding it, but the rest of the wine press is Torah. Maishna Mehadatan, how is it different? This we learned. Sheretz Shenim Sabarechayim. If you found a dead reptile in a mill that was used for grinding the olives before you put them in the olive press, and if you find a sheretz there, the only part that touches it is the only part that's tummy is the part that he touched, the part that the reptile touched. If there was a flowing liquid there on the millstone, then I call tummy. So what do you see? That the whole thing is tummy over there. How does he say over here where there's flowing liquid in the wine press is clearly flowing liquid, so the whole thing should become tummy. There's no barrier stopping it. In the case of the millstone, so if there's flowing liquid there, the whole thing became tamei. So to speak, the water or whatever the olive oil carried it along. Nothing is. There's no barrier there stopping it. Therefore, over here, though, the cluster itself acts as a barrier, as a mechitza, and stops the tumah from going further. The Rabbanan gave instructions to Rav Yomi of Amule, Lebraid Rav Yomi, some said some Rav Yomi, Kedivi Yomer, they paskin, they gave him instruction, Kedivi Yomer, Eshko Kosi of Tmeim, B'cholagat Kula Torah, that only the part, if an amoritz, for that matter, if a dead reptile, you found it on a cluster of grapes in the wine press that had many clusters. So only that cluster itself and the area immediately surrounding it is tummy. The rest of it is tahor. And then you'd have to purify it in the methods that we described in Amar Aleph. Now we get to really the things that are nogea b'zman. Till most of Avodah Zarah was not really nogea to us because we don't have real Avodah Zarah today. However, we do have kashrin kalim that we have. And we learned out from the Torah tells us when the Jews defeated the Midianites, they took their kalim, and the Torah described how to purify them. So the Torah describes here in Bamidbar, says, Kol davar sheyavo be'esh, anything that was used, any cooking utensil was used in fire, tavir be'esh, way to purify it is with fire. In other words, that's what we say that kabolo kachpolto, the same way that it absorbed, that's the way it exudes. You have to get rid of it that way too. Vitar, and that purifies it. The word, we'll see what the word vitar seems extra. It's also got to go into the mikveh. Anything that didn't go in fire, then it's enough just to pass it through water. So we'll come to this pasuk again, but here we get to the concept because even that we have today. If you buy kalim from a goy, they came from chutz la'aretz, bought from a goy, they have to be tobel, even if they're new. That's going to be what we're talk about in today's daf. If you bought utensils, mostly cooking utensils from goyim, if all it was used for, meaning it was used for coal, all they did was they dipped stuff in it, meaning something which is roy to purify by simply immersion in a mikveh. All you have to do is tovel it. Rashi says, if it's used for cold, used like say for cold cups or drinks, let's say glassware, things that you know were used for cold, it's enough only to be tovel them, and that's good enough, like we do. Lahagil, if it was the minig was what to used in scalding, then yagel, you have to scald. In other words, if it was something that was necessary, that was used in hot, so it needs hagola. Like if you cook hot soup in it or coffee or something hot, needs scalding. L'laben, if it's something that needs whitening ba'or, yabmor, in other words, something that was used in fire itself, so you have to whiten it, meaning make it real hot. You have to burn it out with fire. Hashvod ba'askala, a spit or a grill, malaben ba'or, they're used in fire, obviously, so therefore you have to kasher them by putting fire to them. Hasaken, if you have a knife, shafavi Torah, you can just polish it with a stone, and that also gets rid of everything. Use a stone of blacksmith, probably a hot stone, and that's good enough. Tana, afterwards, meaning all these things, even if all you did was what? I mean, if you kashered it by burning it, right? Liebman, like you took a torch to it, or something of that sort, or you scalded it, like hagola. You took your pots, like people do before Pesach, and they do hagola to clean them out, to purge them of any impurities, purge them of any chametz, whatever it was. Afterwards, you have to put them in the mikveh. You have to also put them in the mikveh afterwards. Now we're not talking about you need tefillah if you bought them from a goy. Here we're talking about if you're just kashering your pot for Pesach, right? So there was no goy involved over there, right? So it's enough just to do the hagolah. You don't have to do tefillah. All kinds of shilas come out today about tefillah, about what you have to be tovel. Are you tovel glassware or not? We'll talk about the Gemara is going to talk about glassware, but a lot of things are sveikas. What do you do? If, for example, it was a Jewish kli, but then it was fixed by a goy. So if it had any goyish intervention, you have to do tefillah. Let's say you have a ger. A ger was Megayer. He was a goy. Does he have to be tovel as Caleb? Also machlokas, right? Because it was owned by a goy, right? All kinds of things. So, for example, if you sell your chametz to a goy, right? You're not really. Are you selling the Caleb? It belongs to him. Then you have to tovel it again. However, you're not really selling the kalim, you're saying the chametz in the kalim. All kinds of questions come up today about what do you do? And if Suffolk, the rabbis say tovel it, what about electric things? So some say if it's something that it's only used with electricity and it's attached to the ground, doesn't need doesn't need like an urn on Shabbos or a toaster or something like that. Some say you tovel it a little bit, just avoid the electricity parts. Some say that since it's only can be used when it's plugged into the wall, then it's like attached to the ground, doesn't need tefillah. Any case, how do we know that? How do we know that they need? If you bought it from a goy, not only do you have to kasher it, but you have to be tovel it. You have to immerse it in 40 saw. Rav Pasuk says, Pasuk I just quoted, Kol davar ashiyav ba'esh tavir ba'esh. Anything that came in with fire, in other words, it's used in fire, you should also pass through fire. V'taher. That extra word is v'taher, and it will be a purified. In other words, it could have just said, pass it through fire, burn it out, right? Get rid of any substance that was remaining in there. Then it says v'taher. There's another tar you have to go to the mikvah. Tani bar kapara mitoch shenemar b'mei nida. Says, what does it say? It says, kol davar she'yavo yesh tavir b'esh v'taher. What does it mean, mei nida? The water of separation. What does that mean? Maybe you need hazah on the third and seventh day, like somebody who was tamei meis, and he needs to be purified by being sprinkled with the meichatos on the third and seventh days. Follow that by going to the mikveh. So I might think that this mei nida refers also to the meichatos, to the paraduma water, right? So that all refers to mei nida. So I would think maybe you have to sprinkle on the third and seventh day too. All these different items. Tamalomer ach. It says ach in that pasuk. Ach is an exclusion. Right? No, not everything. In other words, it's an exclusion that doesn't need the meichatos. So what does mei nida teach us? Mayim shenida tavelas man. It's a mayim that a woman who's a nida, who has to separate herself, she's tovelin, which is that Havi Omer Abom saw. It's got to be a mikvah of 40 saw. That's why it says mei nida, to tell me not that you need meichatos to kasher these items after they've been purged of their tumah or their chametz or whatever it was, of their yayin nesech or their treifness, whatever you purged out of there. But it also means mei nida gets to be put in a mikvah, regular mikvah. Now, why does it say toher, which you say goes in a mikvah, and it also says mei nida, which refers to the mikvah? Because we're talking min of a Torah b'koltu. Just put it in water. It doesn't have to be 40 saw. Because rachmana mei nida, water that a woman could be tovel in, which is 40 saw, regular mikvah. Because rachmana b'mei nida, if we don't say b'mei nida v'yomer, having I would have thought harav shemesh kanida. You have to wait also at night. In other words, if you're tired in the morning, you got to wait till nighttime, just like a woman has to wait till the nighttime to go to the mikvah, right? So harav shemesh kanida, a woman who's a nida goes to mikvah at night. Other ones, if it's zav, it doesn't have to go at night. Other cases, you don't have to go at night, a mitzvah or whatever. But this has to be at night. Because rachmana b'torah to tell me la'alter that your Torah immediately, but you have to immediately after you purged it of its tumah and you put it in the mikvah, it's mutter right away. Amar Nachman Amar Abavua. Afilu kem chadashim b'mashma. Even new kalim also have to be put in the mikvah. The yeshanim v'livnon. Let's say they were old v'livnon and you whiten them. In other words, you burn them out. Chadashim they're like new. You put it in the furnace or you burn it out with a torch or whatever. It's like new. Still needs mikvah. So therefore, when you buy kalim from a guy, even new kalim, like we do, needs the Maskul of Sheishes, even shearing scissors, like scissors that you just use, there's have to go to the mikvah. These are kalim, and they are new. Do they have to be put them in the mikvah? Amalei, Klei Suda Amrina B'Parsha talks about vessels that are used in food vessels, right? Which basically tells us, the Chassid says, what do you use in fire? Pots and pans and kettles and things like that. Things that are talked about, things that came in fire. What else would you wouldn't normally use scissors, wouldn't put them in fire. When he tells you things that were used in fire, you have to put them in fire. So we're talking about only food utensils. That's only if you bought them from a guy, meaning they're yours now. Like with Midian, where they conquered Midian and they took all the spoils, including all the utensils, they took it away from them and they belong now to the Jews. If you borrow or not. So that's the truth. If you borrow a kli, let's say you borrow some pots and pans. This is a big shiloh when it comes to caterers and things like that. And or you rent, all kinds of cooking utensils, plates and pots and pans. If they're borrowed, they don't require tefillah. That's the rule. It's only why? Because we learned it also from Midian. Midian is when the Jews took them, called them stolen, whatever. They beat them and they took everything and they belonged to them. This is where Yosef, Zavan Mana the Mardam Evkavan, he bought a vessel made out of earth and dung. There was a kind of a vessel that they would make from earth, from dirt, and mixed it up with various dung, and they would make like an earthenware vessel out of that. He thought he had to be told it. So one of the rabbis, Rabbi Yaakov told him, I heard from Yochanan, Kli matachos amur in the parsha. We're talking about only metal vessels. Says Rashi, Kli matachos le'inyan tefila b'kli of the chum d'chsiv es azahav v'esakesef. Talks about gold and silver. Talks about metal vessels only. So only metal vessels require this kind of cleaning. Or earthenware vessels, you can't kosher anyway, right? Because they absorb everything. You can't get it out. But we're talking about kli matachos, we're talking about purifying them and in other words, scalding them, purifying them, whatever you did, purify them, plus putting them in the mikveh. In other words, when we say there's two things, there's the scalding, the purging of the forbidden item that's absorbed in the kli, and then rinsing and putting them in a mikveh, not rinsing them, immersing them in a mikveh. So those two processes are only referring to metal items. Amar Bashi, what about glassware? Since if they break, you can melt them down and put them back and make them vessels again. He says, therefore, they also require going to the mikveh, right? These also require putting in the mikveh, and that's why we tovel glassware today. Kunya, they say that, it's always a question about china, right? Because the real good china is earthenware, so it does require, it depends on what you hold. So most cases you have, if it's not really metal, usually you make it, you tovel without making a bracha, if you're not really sure. Kunya, what about an earthenware vessel that was glazed with lead? So the item itself is earthenware, right? And that doesn't require going to the mikveh, right? Because we said only metal or metal-like items. What about this? But it's glazed with metal. So the outside is metal, it's lined with lead. So what do you say there? One says like at the beginning, you consider it like what it's its original form, it's earthenware, and therefore it doesn't require going to the mikveh. Like the end where it's glazed, where it has a lead lining on top of it, and therefore it's like metal. And with paskin like kassofa, and since the outside is lead, it goes to the mikveh. Iboilu, mashkanta. What happens? We said before that if you borrow it, you don't have to go to you don't have to be tovel it. Only if it's yours. What happens if a guy gave it to you as a mashkan, gave it to you for collateral, right, as a pledge? You lent him some money and he gave you that as a pledge. So you didn't really buy it. It's not yours yet. On the other hand, it's not borrowed either. You have some let's say fiduciary ownership in it, because if he doesn't pay you back, you'll keep it. So what he's pardon? Yeah, you could. You could use it if there's no damage to it. If you're allowed to use it. If it's something that doesn't deteriorate with usage, gives you a spoon or something like that. Amar Mabar Abashi, Abba, my father, Mashkan Levikachavim, my father was given as a mashkan, as a pledge by a goy, Kasa de Kaspa, a silver goblet, Ba'atble, and he toveled it. So it's mashma that you do have to tovel. However, Bishtive, and then he drank, or I drank with it. But I don't know, is it because he held that that a mashkan is like a purchase, and therefore that's why he was tovel it, or because he saw that the guy had no intention of paying back the loan, and he really meant for you to keep the spoon or whatever it was. You understand? So I'm not sure if my father told it because he saw that it was really a purchase, that he was going to acquire it effectively, or because he felt that a mashkanta is like a sale. So I'm not sure. So again, misafek, he toveled it. Tanrabana. You buy a service vessel, like a cooking utensil from a guy, something that was never used before. Matpila, All you have to do is put it in the mikveh, immerse it in the mikveh, and a mikveh 40 ain't Torah. Something was used for cold, let's say a beer keg or something like that made out of metal or whatever. So you know that it was only used for cold. Could go on, like you say, cups, kosos, petunias, and jugs, sluchas or flasks, things that they just drank from the use for cold stuff. Matichan, all you have to do is rinse. Now again, we're talking about metal vessels. We're not talking about earthenware. We talked about earthenware before. Sometimes you can't be told, but if it was used for, let's say it was a wine container, something that contained wine, that would be a problem. You can't be clean. Here we're talking about metal stuff. So if it was used for cold, like cups or jugs or flasks, madichan umatbil, you can rinse them off to make sure there's no remnant of something not kosher on the cup, and tell them bang Torah. It's used for hot kagon hayoros, like boilers, kumkumas, and like kettles, like kumkum, machamichamin, and heating vessels. Magil, they have to be scalded, purged totally, umatbilan, and put them in the mikveh. Bang Torah in the time. Or something was used by fire, kagon hashvod, like we said before, like spits, vaskals, and grills. Malabnan, they need libun, which means making it white hot to get rid of all the forbidden elements. Umatbil and told with it, the hain Torah, and that's good enough. Again, it requires both cleansing like this, both purging and immersing when you're getting it from a goy. If it's your own item, like you say, like on Pesach, when you're just going to get it the chametz, all you have to do is the purging. Let's say you used it, let's say you used it before you put it in the mikveh, and you hadn't purged it yet, and you didn't do leaving yet. Let's say you didn't do this, you didn't kasher it properly. You bought it from a guy, you bought a pot from a guy, and he had used it obviously for something hot, like hot soup, or a grill that was used for grilling on the fire, and you used it without kashering it. You didn't put it in the mikveh, you didn't purge it. What's the halacha? What's a machlokas? Tanichada asur, tanichada. One says here it's asur to use, you can't eat that food. One says it's mutter. So is it a steer? It's lo kasha. Hakaman damer nos tam lefgam asur. Hakaman damer nos tam lefgam mutter. We discussed on Shabbos the issue of nos and tam lefgam. What does that mean? A forbidden substance that imparts a worsened or a deteriorating flavor in the new item. Like you're cooking, let's say, a hot dog, or you're putting a hot dog on a grill that you bought from a goy, and you didn't kasher it for. So now what's the issue? That was some flavor that the guy had used for his davaracha there, right? His pig, whatever his, he had put some, bacon or something on the grill, and now you're concerned, does the smell or the flavor of the bacon, is that imparted into the hot dog? So, right? So that's a forbidden substance that imparts a worsened flavor. That's a machlokas. What does that do? Is no stam gam osir, is it mutter? Because it's a worsened flavor. So if you hold that no stam gam is osir, and over here you use the grill without kashing it first, then you can't eat the food. The one who says no stam gam is mutter, you're allowed to eat the food, and that's apparently the psak. You could use it b'diavad. You're supposed to kasher it first, but if you use it without kashering it, you can still eat the food. If you say it's mutter, so the Torah just said in this pasuk again that if you took something from the Midianites and anything they use in fire, you have to kasher, you have to pass it through fire, burn it out. So, but if no sentam lefgam is mutter, what's the difference if he used it? Let's say the guy used it, but the concern is the flavor that he imparted is mutter anyway. So what's the problem? Why can't you just use it without? Why did the Torah say that you have to kasher, purge the kalim of the guy? If you say that Talmud was mutter, so what when the Torah asked, what are we speaking about? The Torah was talking about if the guy used it that morning. He used it at 10 o'clock in the morning for ham. And now you bought it from him at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you want to use it, that's when the Torah forbade it. Then why? Because no sintam lefgam there it's not no sintam lefgam. If you bought it from him fresh, meaning you used it for ham in the morning, and at 2 in the afternoon, you're going to use it for your kosher frankfurters, right? So then the taste that it imparts from the ham could be good, could be imparting a good taste. That's a problem. But over here, when you bought it from the goy stam, and you're using it days or weeks or months after he used it, then it's no stam lefgam. And that's what it means. The Torah asa lo asa Torah l'kedera bas yoma the lav no stam lefgamu. because that's good, imparting a good taste. Mikan va'elach, so mikan va'elach lishtri. Okay, so wait a minute. So if the Torah only forbade it that day, so what's the big deal? You buy a pot from a guy, you know it's cold, he hasn't used it for several days, right? It's been sitting on the shelf. So that should be mutter. Why do we say that when you buy kalim from a guy, you have to kasher them, either with libun or with scalding with hot water? I mean, it's only also if you use it the same day. We make a gzeira that even if it's old, he hasn't used it for weeks or months, and you still have to kasher because we're afraid you might buy one from him that he's used that day, and if you use that day, that would be a problem because you're going to be eating treif. So what about the one who holds nos and tam fgam is usher, right? Nos tam fgam is usher. What do you mean? He says is also nos tam fgam, meaning when the Torah forbade using it, he says forbid in all cases, even if it's that day, that's also non tam fgam, and the Torah forbade that. See, according to the one who holds nos tam fgam is mutter. So the Torah only forbade it if you're using it that day, because then it's not nos and tam lefgam. If you use it the same day, the flavor of the ham improves your hot dog. Now you got a hot dog with ham, so it's an improved one. So that day is what the Torah assered. But the next day, it's nos and tam lefgam. Nos and tam is mutter. Whereas the one who holds nos and tam lefgam is asser, he holds no. When the Torah forbade it that day, that is also no good. Even if the same day, also mifkim. In other words, the flavor of the ham, even if you use it later on for kosher hot dogs in the afternoon, that's also imparting a bad flavor, and the Torah forbade that. So the Torah forbade all nos and tam lefgam, whether it's that day or it's later on, it's all asser. All right, we'll pick it here tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, and Bezrat Hashem we'll finish the parak and finish the Masechet. Have a good day, everybody. All too.